Good morning. Good morning. I'm a little unwell this morning, so please excuse me if it's not a very long talk. Just yesterday, I was looking at Facebook, and a Facebook acquaintance who is also a practitioner was remarking on how, I guess just that afternoon, she had been maybe out near her home, and I think there's a nice rural area there. So she was out in the woods, and she was discussing about how she just kind of sat down somewhere, and she wasn't particularly trying to meditate, but her mental process became very slow, so that there were hardly, very few thoughts. She was just kind of hanging out, enjoying the evidently pleasant weather wherever she was. And I was familiar with what she was describing, but I thought that some people reading this might come to the conclusion that it was a result of extreme accomplishment in meditative practice. And I was going to make a comment on the Facebook page, and I thought, nah, I'll probably start some flame war, so I'm not going to do that. This phenomenon is accessible to anybody. So it's not just because this person's an experienced meditator. What is necessary, basically, is just the willingness not to interfere with whatever is arising in the moment. And you might say, well, isn't that what we do in Zazen? It's like, well, yes. Usually under kind of formal circumstances, and the formal circumstances are they're a little bit a part of Zazen practice. The formality, for instance, a setting like this is a useful kind of counterbalance to the fact that the instructions for our way of practice are rather brief and not very detailed. And that's by design. And unless you're fairly experienced, if you have, on the one hand, brief instructions that are not detailed, and also a very kind of easy, unstructured environment, it might just turn into, sleep or daydreaming, which is not the same thing at all. So, therefore, the environment is a little bit structured. We have a certain way of moving and sitting and so forth. It's a balance. But if you're out in the woods, just hanging out, for instance, to accept completely each moment of the body-mind as it is a way of acknowledging and supporting the ability of the mind to simply settle itself. We often talk about that. We don't say, you have to settle your mind. That being a misleading instruction. So we do say, well, just allow the mind to settle, and it will. And if the environment is, in addition, very, relaxed and kind of welcoming, and you're out there and the birds are singing and animals are strolling by, and so forth. This sense of the processes of the body-mind slowing and moving in this very easy rhythm without our involvement, without any deliberate manipulation, is quite accessible to anyone. So if you hear about or read something like that, don't be fooled into thinking, oh, well, I can't do that. My mind's too busy. I'm always thinking. Set aside those a priori conclusions, to set them aside and allow the deep currents of the body-mind to manifest themselves. And also, you might be tempted to start like kind of counting, okay, well, how many thoughts am I having, and is it any less than usual? But you can set that aside too. Because that means you don't trust your own body-mind. If you're having to bring criteria to test your experience, that's not conducive to being completely relaxed and at home and allowing the rise and fall to occur naturally. So this is, again, not very different from our practice, but the degree of formality is different. And as I've told you before, when I was in Japan, I was at first surprised at how much time the professionals over there spent adjusting the level of formality. Sometimes in the middle of a ceremony, there'd be some adjustment, which is quite interesting. So in our particular way, the level of formality is a quite important factor. And it can be at everywhere from extremely formal to like hardly formal at all. And with experience, one can determine what's appropriate for a particular circumstance. When we got around to doing the Bodhidharma memorial, beginning of November, when I was there, that was quite formal. And we went over and over that ceremony, and there were 6 of us Westerners, and they asked us to participate. And each of us had a cue, which when the cue happened, we were to kind of approach the altar in this very peculiar pattern of footsteps. And I forget, do an elaborate bow or maybe make an offering or something like that. I don't recall, but that was very formal. And other times it wasn't formal at all. They invited us to go and chat with the little old abbot, who's a very sweet guy. And even though it was in the abbot's room, it was very informal. And he was very relaxed. And so were we. He gave us tea and passed around a bowl of little arare crackers. So it was nice to be able to experience all these different levels of formality and how they can interact with the humans who are present. So maybe the sun will be out today, and you can go and sit in your yard or the park or something and just let things be. And whatever degree, if you like, of decrease in activity you notice, just accept that and maybe be grateful. And the more you cultivate that, or allow that to be cultivated, I think the more you'll appreciate the body-mind's own capacity to be at rest. This is quite helpful, quite good for our health too. Especially in times when things are a little tense, as they've been for seemingly forever. And maybe again, of course. So this is a, you might say, if there are three kind of supporting principles to the Bodhisattva path, they are said to be Karuna, which is compassion, Bodhicitta, which is the thought of enlightenment, and Prajna, which is wisdom. So the Bodhisattva brings all three of these to bear in following the path towards saving all beings. And what I just said about how you can sit out in the woods and let nature support you. That could be one little little piece of prajna to add to the corpus of wisdom that is accumulating for us at all times. Bodhicitta, you know about, I think. We know about Bodhicitta, yes. Just the notion that, Shakyamuni Buddha discovered that there is such a thing as awakening, and I will commit myself to the path of awakening for the sake of all sentient beings. This is Bodhicitta. The Karuna, compassion, of course, is, as I tend to express it, is allowing our body-mind to respond, to feel and respond to the sufferings of other beings. And maybe sometimes you can do something. Not always, but sometimes. So these are these three principles supporting the Bodhisattva path. Here's another little piece of prajna, wisdom, courtesy of our original teacher, Shakyamuni Buddha. The teaching is that of course, we hear of this in various ways as we follow Buddha's path. But the teaching is that there is no separate sovereign self. Basically, this is a way of expressing Buddha's profound insight. And maybe more explicitly, Shakyamuni taught that, another way of saying that is, there is no separate sovereign self to be found. There's no separate sovereign self to be found. And if there is no separate sovereign self to be found, it can't be separate or sovereign. It's a very simple formula, but this is, again, a kind of a nugget of prajna, wisdom, based on Shakyamuni's own insight, and formulating the insight in that way or in other ways is quite useful to help shape our thinking such that we are, in a way, preparing our body-mind for that same insight. And to have a little formula like that we bring up and consider from time to time is a good exercise. If there is no separate sovereign self to be found, it cannot be a separate sovereign self. Anything worthy of being a separate sovereign self will have certain qualities. And one of them is not, you can't find it. That just doesn't make sense. And if it's not separate or not sovereign, then it is not the way we usually think about our person. The assumption we make is exactly that, if we stop someone on the street and try to engage them in a conversation about the self, probably they will, unless they've had some insight of their own or are familiar with Buddha's teaching, they'll probably feel like saying, well, yeah, I'm here. What do you mean? Here I am. Self. And then depending on the circumstances, you might say, well, what are some of the qualities of that creature, whatever it is, that self? And usually very quickly, the conversation falters. After citing a couple of things, people run out of stuff to say and realize, well, I can't really say much about it, but I know it's there. It's like, oh, okay. So that's kind of fun. This is another way that wisdom can enter the life stream of all of you bodhisattvas who have entered upon that path and are cultivating compassion and thought of enlightenment and transcendent wisdom. And of course, the essential practice of transcendent wisdom is called zazen. If we think that at some point we're going to figure out how to transcend, then I think we're going to be frustrated. Transcendent wisdom is not figurable. Maybe some kinds of wisdom are, and that's okay, but then they're not transcendent wisdom. Transcendent wisdom is outside of the realm of figuring this or that. And our practice embodies that truth, if you like. Maybe we can get away, at least in here, maybe we can get away with calling that a truth. And that's, of course, at the heart of that the famous story about the sixth ancestor, Nanyang Guenong and, Dajang Guenong and one of his two great disciples, Nanyue Huairang. And you all know that story where Nanyue comes to see Huainong, the sixth ancestor. And they're having a little visit, and Huainong asks him, where are you coming from? And Nanyue says, I forget, down south or up north or something. And the sixth ancestor asks him, what is it that thus comes? Which is, of course, is a play on Tathagata, the thus come one. And Nanyue says, well, if I say it's this or it's that, it misses the point. And Huineng says, oh, so practice and realization have nothing to do with it? And Nanyue says, anybody remember? No? Nanyue says, I don't say practice and realization have nothing to do with it, but it can't be defiled. And Huineng thought, that's pretty good. He didn't say that, but he thought it's pretty good. And Nanyue hung around for like 13 years. So Nanyue was off to a good start, and he hung around for 13 years. It's a pretty good spirit. And this can't be defiled, this at the heart of our Zazen practice also. And if you really trust that, then there's not so much struggle in our practice, you know. This teeth gritting, brow furrowing, headache inducing, cramp inducing approach to practice can relax. If that trust is very wholehearted. And sometimes, there's trust. There's also a little corner that's being kept away from that and spying on the trust and seeing, how's that going? Is that working all right? And that's not really wholehearted. There's this, I don't know exactly when this idea arose in the Jewish world. No, I can't remember who first came up with this notion, but someone argued that the reason the Messiah was not here was because we're not wholehearted. And that's probably true too. You can try that one out on your Jewish friends and see if they smile or hit you. Well, okay. I'm glad we have a little digital presence here. Otherwise, More. Oh, more. Oh, cool. Okay, better yet. Sometimes we have so many more seats than we need in here. It feels a little lonely, but this added way of reaching other beings is quite grateful for. And even occasionally four-footed beings. Maybe there's a question or comment today. Hokai-san.
Thank you for your talk. What do you think about these people like Eckhart Tolle and Adyashanti? Like Adyashanti was walking around across his living room and suddenly had some sort of awakening, or Eckhart Tolle, I think, was sitting on a bench. And I mean, I'm not
And,
it seems like there's an element of luck sometimes for this.
Attic lying on the floor.
Yeah, Byron Katie, those are another one I was thinking of. I mean, these are all people who aren't necessarily Buddhists, but they have supposedly some sort of awakening insight. Yeah, so I don't know. It just seems like all these causes and conditions need to come together. And I mean, maybe even the Buddha, like at some point he just had enough food and then he sat there and like maybe it just, I don't know.
Maybe
anyway, do you have what?
Maybe he just sat there. That's
I mean, but when you look at him though, I mean, he like really worked at it for like 6 years, right? And then suddenly, I mean, so.
Said, okay, wait, some of that was like a waste of time. Like all that stuff where I starved myself, that was a waste of time. And all that stuff hanging out in the palace with those girls, waste of time.
Okay.
Maybe I'll just sit here, tree, and see what happens. And
okay.
that version of lying on the attic floor. Of course, the Buddhists, I mean, especially the Tibetans would say, oh, those, Eckhart Tolle and those guys, they've been practicing for eons.
Mm-hmm.
Even if they didn't dress like a Buddhist, or
okay,
that's what it's based on. And if it's genuine insight is always like the same, you might say. And it is quite extraordinarily often that those in the human realm who speak of something transcendent often sound so much like each other.
Mm.
And another factor is they often upset some of the other people around them. Like, well, wait a minute, that's not what it says in this book. Let's burn you, and they do sometimes. Yes, Ty.
So speaking of this, it's sort of like I feel kind of commodification of Buddhist teaching.
Yeah.
Right.
Kind of packaging.
Yeah, in business too. I mean, I'm not trying to judge them, but
right.
As Zen teacher in our circle, our teaching is different, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you don't charge people. Right.
We're grateful.
Yeah.
So
it's free.
We don't charge people.
But people pay them to. So it's like multitudes going on, but one can have multitudes in different teachings.
Yeah.
Like why practicing then you follow Byron, whoever, right?
Yeah.
Mind can do that.
Yeah.
They're too busy.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I don't know, but I imagine, maybe this isn't true, but I imagine that some of those, I don't know if it's right to call them self-awakened people. Yeah. I don't know if that's quite right, or if it's just, well, their teachers are not visible to us. Mm-hmm. But in any case, maybe, at some point they just started talking and some other people came and said, do you have enough money for groceries? Here's some money, and started giving them money. And that just turned into this thing where people were giving the money, but they never actually asked for it. That's also possible. I don't know if that's how it is or if they actually set up well, I think none of them actually set up a business entity. Someone else always does that. And maybe some of those folks are profiting pretty well from it too. This is capitalism for you. Mm-hmm. So I don't know what to think. We just sort of stand around sheepishly with our little hand out and hope that somebody will put something in it. Mm-hmm. And that works fairly well, until something expensive breaks, and then it doesn't work that well. Mm-hmm. And we have to stick the hand out farther and say, help us, please. So
you don't believe one can have that kind of practice and this kind of practice for the mind?
When you say that kind of practice, you mean like Eckhart Tolle and those guys?
Stuff like that.
Well, Byron Katie has she has something she calls the work, mm-hmm. but I'm not really sure what that is, except it sounds like Eckhart Tolle mm-hmm. or Adyashanti. It sounds kind of like, it has to do with wholeheartedly trusting the present moment and this body mind. Right? That's kind of the work. And that sounds a lot like what we do,
Yeah.
you know? So maybe that's not an accident. But maybe there are people who relate to this attractive older woman, and they wouldn't relate to me, or they relate to Eckhart Tolle, this little European guy, or Adyashanti, who's very, very handsome and kind of elegant, you know, and different people respond, you know, so. Yes.
It sounds like, these are all just different channels of places where, someone would resonate with the presentation of the teacher or the teachings.
Right.
And it's just calling to mind with yoga. A lot of people come to yoga for physical fitness or
Yes.
stress relief or,
Right.
to whatever reason that is more, graspable.
Uh-huh.
And yet, as they practice, they start finding that the practice is actually affecting, the body mind,
Yeah.
and sure, the body, but
Mhm.
but some other parts. So
Yeah.
the way it's different gateways
Yeah.
to get.
Yeah. A friend of mine who's pretty accomplished in yoga is also tends to be quite cynical and dismissive of spirituality. And then one day he was in yoga class, and the teacher periodically would ask him to demonstrate something. And I think the teacher, was pointing at a leg or something and said, "Oh, look, there's a mind in there." And he thought, "Whoa, really?" And that was a big change for him. He wasn't so cynical anymore after that. So it goes. Hokai-san, did you finish your question? I noticed we kind of zinged away from you there.
I think so. Sorry. I guess so. I just feel like I wonder if there's a little bit of luck. Like I get it, like being outside, it relaxes. It's kind of like I guess I see it as the Zen and the archery. Like you can't let go of the bow, but the bow has to, like it's a letting go, I think, that has to happen, but you can't force it. But anyway, that's all. I don't know. Maybe it's a comment more than a question.
Mm-hmm. The person who was commenting on Facebook, she didn't present this as like some insight. It's just like kind of familiar state. It wasn't exactly a state, but a way of experiencing the world and oneself. It was quite pleasant, and easy.
People shy about the environment.
Yeah. Now I'm not real conversant with this person's lineage and so forth. But anyway, she was just kind of presenting it as like this really nice afternoon that happened. And so it was not presented in the context of, I had this blinding insight. It was just, this is how the body mind can work if we let it, right? And that requires some trust and patience and the willingness not to like constantly try to keep track of how's this going? Am I better today than I was yesterday? And that's a habit that's easy to get into. And it's good if we can let that go. And that's part of this wholeheartedness.
Thank you.
David.
Just one brief comment on that. It sounds like maybe instead of luck, it's more like what a Christian mystic would regard as grace.
Yeah.
This experience, maybe it comes to you, maybe it doesn't. When it does, it's through grace that it occurs. That's just my look at that.
I'm inclined to agree. Certain Christian formulations, of course, say that you can put yourself in a state that is receptive to grace.
Well, it is all that too.
Yes, sure, exactly. But you can, if you're a Roman Catholic, you can participate in the life of the church and the sacraments and so forth. And this is actually conducive. It's like welcoming of grace that is freely given. So I guess, and I wouldn't say it was luck. I think most, for instance, our Tibetan friends would say, luck, are you kidding? This is eons of karma from practice of the Buddha way. It's not luck, but it can look like it, you know. It can look like, oh, I was in the right place at the right time. Yeah, and you've been doing that for the last 10,000 lives. So.
I had a quick question
Yeah.
about the formality in Japan. And I was wondering if that ability to adjust the levels of formality, would that come from sort of a little set of rules and regs they have, or would it come from more of an intuitive place that an experienced practitioner might have?
Well, that's kind of one and the same thing, because the experienced practitioners are highly conversant with those rules and regulations. So they know how to move in a way that adjusts the level of formality and doesn't create a problem. Let's put it that way. You know, something like that, I guess. Cheryl-san?
Oh, just with what you two were just saying about grace, I'm just wondering if sitting zazen kind of trains the mind so that you can be in the forest and receptive in a way that without training and practice,
yeah.
maybe that moment would be missed.
It's a practice of receptivity and acquaints one with this lower levels, maybe that's one way to put it, of the body mind. And then as that acquaintance grows, then our trust grows. And as our trust grows, our receptivity grows. And there you are. Oh, yes.
Wasn't it, I think it was Suzuki Roshi who said enlightenment's an accident and zazen makes us accident prone.
Well, I heard that from Aitken Roshi, but another one of those people, yes, our ancestors. Yeah.
American ancestor.
American ancestor.
Which one? First American ancestor.
The first American ancestor? Let's see. Who would be the first American ancestor? I'd have to research. I'm not exactly sure who that would be.
Swans came to the lake.
Swans came to the
Dig into
lake.
that.
Whoever it is, he or she is probably dead now. So we're already in another generation and maybe another generation. I'm almost dead. I'm 70 in another 10 days or so. And then there's another generation coming, we hope, somewhere.
I wanted to ask a question about a person named Don. I don't know his last name. I was talking with an LGBT historian about the people who kind of helped to get pre-Hartford Street in place.
Mm-hmm.
And he talked about a fellow named Don who might have lived in the house somehow and now lives out in the Presidio. Do you know anything about this person?
Well, I'm not sure, but maybe David, do you know? Don?
I remember a person named Don Harold who was back here in the early days.
I lived here with Don Harold and several years ago now. So I don't know if that's the Don that you're thinking of. Oh, I think we just lost you. Oh, there you are. There was Don Harold, and I can't really remember any other Don offhand.
One I can recall.
Yeah. And yeah, he was around back in the day, but beyond that, I don't remember too many details. And he was treasurer here for quite a while. Okay, well, we can stop here and you all can go have a nice weekend. And, remember those three things: Karuna, Bodhicitta, and Prajna. They are propelling you along on your path. Thank you very much.